We are recording this webinar. Welcome to Countryside Stewardship online events. I'm Neil Punchard and will chair today's meeting. The presentation will be given by Mel Holloway with support from Nathan Walker and Rebecca Inman. We're delivering this on behalf of Natural England. Normally these events would be face-to-face, but over the last few years the format has shifted to online meetings that I hope you're getting used to. But just a few points of housekeeping. Video and sound are off. There will be a question session at the end and the opportunity to ask questions throughout the presentation. And that's by typing into the Q&A, the question and answer box. And we'll pick these up as we go along. We do have a register of those on the call and we'll automatically send out a link to an electronic feedback form at the end. And this will also appear on the screen when the webinar ends. So please, can you complete this? It should only take a couple of minutes and it will also enable you to claim basis points if you need them. Finally, these events are only a broad introduction of Countryside Stewardship, so they won't be able to cover everything. We will be providing individual sessions with a specialist advisor, and that's free to all Countryside Stewardship applicants. The contact details for booking one of these will also be sent at the end of the meeting. So over to you, Mel.
Thanks very much, Neil, and welcome everyone. So what I'm going to be covering is an overview of Countryside Stewardship, so how this scheme can benefit the environment, how it can benefit you on your farm, and the different elements of Countryside Stewardship. We'll also be covering catchment sensitive farming and how that fits in with Countryside Stewardship, and also the management of designated sites such as SSSIs and scheduled monuments, and the options that are available for priority habitats and species. And then I will finish off just by talking a little bit about the sustainable farming incentives, so the opportunities that are available now and those that are going to be available later this year. So obviously we're all aware that we are in a transition stage as far as agriculture is concerned. So obviously BPS payments are starting to reduce, and there are other opportunities for grant funding that are coming up. And probably the best way for you to be able to keep up to speed with everything that's going on is to sign up for the .gov.uk email updates and perhaps also the Future Farming blog as well, so you can make sure that you're completely up to speed on what's happening. So why apply for Countryside Stewardship? One of the main reasons is that it is a flexible scheme that you can fit in with your business. So it's up to you what options you want to have and on what fields. So it's not a whole farm grant application. This gives you greater flexibility with management and helps you to be able to identify the options that are going to give you the best environmental benefit, but also the best financial outcome as well. And this can help reduce the impact of BPS reductions on your business. There are improvements to the scheme that make it more attractive and more flexible, so very much based on outcomes rather than very rigid rules and specifications. So just thinking about the main priorities of the scheme, so there are four main strands. So the first one is wildlife and nature. So this is focusing on restoring and maintaining habitats and food sources, particularly for farmland birds. Pollinators, it's ensuring that the right resources and sources of pollen and nectar are available at the right time and in the right place. And then water and air quality. So there's a real emphasis on ways in which we can make water and air cleaner and reduce the risk of flooding. And then the fourth element is woodland. Now today we're not covering woodland, but we will be able to give you links to the incentives that are available for woodland creation, maintenance, management and tree health. So as far as Countryside Stewardship is concerned, this slide gives us an overview. So on the left-hand side, we have higher tier, and this tends to be more site-specific with very tailored management for a specific farm. Agreements will be 5 years plus, and this is a very competitive element of Countryside Stewardship. What we're concentrating on today is the middle column and the right-hand column. So we've got mid-tier, which is designed for widespread uptake, offering 5-year agreements that can be any mix of capital and/or land management options. The full mid-tier offer, it is competitive, so it's important that you concentrate on the priorities for your individual farm and selection of options that will meet those priorities. We'll also think about the wildlife offers. So this is a limited range of land management options that are also available in mid-tier, but the application process and the management of the offer is simple, and this is non-competitive. So if you put in an eligible application, you will be guaranteed an agreement. And then we've got the capital grant offer. So for this year, 3-year agreements are being offered. Again, this is competitive, and those capital grants cover a wide range of things under the categories of boundaries, trees and orchards, water quality and air quality, and natural flood management. And it doesn't matter what strand of countryside stewardship you go into, because the payment rate for the same option is identical right across all the different elements. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about each of those. So as far as mid-tier is concerned, you could apply just for land management options, or you could apply for a mixture of land management options and capital items as well. And for this year, there is no upper limit on the capital. So as long as you are comfortable that you are able to complete those works within the first 3 years of your 5-year agreement, then there's a really good opportunity to be able to do work on the farm. If you've got triple SIs or scheduled monuments on your farm, these must be included in your mid-tier application, and I'll talk about those a little bit later on. Mid-tier is where we also find the organic land management and conversion options, and mid-tier also includes options which may require prior approval from the RPA. So this is thinking about specific priority habitats and species. For this year, all of the applications are now online using the Rural Payment Service, unless you are unable to access online, in which case you would need to speak to the RPA. But more about that a little bit later on. So just thinking about those farm and wildlife offers, this is 4 packages. So we have got grassland, we've got arable, we've got mixed farming, and we also have an uplands offer. And the idea of these is that they have a limited number of options that concentrate on providing sources of pollen and nectar on the farm, improving habitats and winter bird food. Again, online application, and it's non-competitive. And this is something that you could look at applying for if you have made a capital only application or you're going to make one in the future. So it is compatible with that. And then we've got the capital grants as a standalone capital grant, exactly the same as through mid-tier. There is no upper limit for 2023, and we have got 3-year agreements that are available. Again, the application is online, and you can also apply separately for a wildlife offer. There is the opportunity to be able to access capital grants if you already have an existing HLS or countryside stewardship agreement, and there are higher tier capital grants available in 2023 as well. I'm just going to mention air quality capital grants. So whilst these have been around for a couple of years now, there is more emphasis on air quality, looking at ways in which we can reduce ammonia emissions and mitigate against those as well. So these tend to be more livestock orientated, but we've got things like automatic slurry scrapers, and we've got low ammonia emission flooring for livestock buildings, as well as some options including supplying and planting a tree with tree shelters to mitigate against those. Now, these options do require catchment sensitive farming approval, which I'll go on to a little bit later on. Now, if this is sounding like there's an awful lot going on, I would say make the most of these one-to-one clinic sessions that are available that Neil mentioned. This is a really good opportunity to have a video call with an experienced advisor who can give you more information on the grants that are available, what's going to be most suitable for you, and you get a written summary of the advice as well. So absolutely nothing to lose if you're just not quite sure about what's going to be the best route for you. So just moving on now, where is all the information? Well, it's on the .gov.uk website, which will tell you all about the different elements of countryside stewardship. And you're perhaps wondering, how do I identify the options that are going to be most appropriate for me, and also the capital items as well? So I'm going to run through 3 different ways in which you can do this. Again, if you have a clinic session, then we will go through these with you to help you identify the priorities. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is using Magic Maps. I'm going to talk about the Rural Payment Service business overview page that you log into for your BPS claims and so on. And then I'm going to talk about the maps that are available that identify the priorities in your area. So the first one, we've got the Magic Maps DEFRA website. So this is a free online mapping tool that allows you to identify priorities on your farm. You can put in your postcode or a location, and then there is a specific countryside stewardship targeting and scoring layers. So on here, I've just selected the water one. It's showing that high priority is red, medium priority is yellow, and white is low priority. But remember, catchment sensitive farming advice is available across the whole of England now. So the other way is that you can look up the National Character Area Statement of Priorities. So the whole of England is divided up into 166 national character areas. And you may find that your land falls over 2 or more different character areas, but you can download these statements and it will tell you a little bit about the priority habitats and species that are important in your area. And then we have also got the Countryside Stewardship Grant Finder. So this is quite a good tool. If you know the code or the option name, you can look up the full detail, the specification of the option, the payment rates, the do's and don'ts, and so on. To help you identify those options in the first place, you can log into your rural payments site as you would do for your BPS or to look at the maps of your farm, and you can select Countryside Stewardship and then select the Countryside Stewardship Options Finder tool. Now, if you do that, it will then come up with a statement of priorities for your farm. And as I say, there might be more than one of those. You can click on that link and download it, and it will give you that background information. Then the next step is to go through a series of questions, and this is to work out which options are going to be most applicable for you. So it's going to be questions about whether you're arable, whether you're grassland, are you organic, what sort of things you're interested in doing, what sort of features you have on the farm. And then it will come up with all of the high priority options. Now, if you click on the links of those options, it takes you to that grants finder page. So we can see there the AB9 winter bird food. It gives you all of the information, the payment rates, do's and don'ts, and there's a lot of additional guidance and advice to help you successfully implement that option on farm. Now, if that's sounding quite complicated, again, use the clinic sessions to be able to speed up this process and to help you identify those high priority options, and also to give you advice on how suitable they are, whether they would work on your farm, things to be aware of. So that's a quick overview of identifying options and priorities. Have we got any questions so far?
Though there is one question which I'm just answering about organic conversion, and I'm answering that in text. So you can probably carry on, Mel, for now.
Okay, yeah, we've got a little section on organics that comes later on. Thank you, Nathan. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the wildlife offers now. These simplified schemes might be appropriate for some of you. So as far as the arable offer is concerned, what we have is 19 options divided up into 3 categories. And you have got no maximum that you can put into a wildlife offer, as long as you meet the minimum requirements. And so what this is asking for is that you choose options or an option from the first category, which is delivering nectar and pollen sources for insect pollinators and birds. Now, this will account for 1% of your application area. And remember, that doesn't have to be your entire farm. It can include just the parcels that you want to include. The second category provides sources of winter bird food, such as wild bird food plots and overwintered stubbles. And this will need to account for 2% of your application area. And then you have a third category, which includes things like buffer strips, fallow mixes, hedgerow management, etc. And you just choose something from that final category. Now, as far as the lowland grazing offer is concerned, this includes 11 options, again, divided into 3 categories, concentrating on pollinators and farmland birds. So again, you choose from each of those categories. The mixed farming offer, as it suggests, includes options that cover grassland and include arable land, again with those 3 categories to select from. And then there is an upland offer. We're not talking specifically about uplands today, but if you are farming in an upland area, we can put you in contact with the free clinic sessions in your area. Have we got any questions specifically on the wildlife offers?
No.
None at present, Mel.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to talk now about catchment sensitive farming. Now, some of you will be aware of catchment sensitive farming. It has the remit of raising awareness of the issues of diffuse pollution from agriculture and identifying suitable mitigation and preventative measures. And from this year onwards, that advice and information is available to all farmers across England. Previously, it was for specific priority areas. So catchment sensitive farming, or CSF, will advise on countryside stewardship, capital items and land management options that can help address those issues related to water and air quality and flood risk. Some of the capital items and land management options in countryside stewardship do require CSF approval, and they are listed in the annexes of the relevant manual. So if you are wanting advice from CSF and/or you're looking at requesting approval of those items and options that require that, then you need to complete the CSF support request form, and it will need to be emailed to your local CSF mailbox. Now, we will share all these links in the slides, but that's where you will find that request form. It's really important that you fill that out with as much information as possible. And remember that you need to submit requests for CSF approval at least 10 weeks before you intend to submit your application to the RPA. So as far as the capital grants are concerned, the application window is open all of the time for those, whereas for mid-tier, that closes on the 18th of August of this year. So thus the 9th of June 2023 would be the last date to submit a request for support for a mid-tier application this year. I would urge you to make contact with your with catchment sensitive farming in your area. Have a look at that request form. If you're not sure of the information to include, again, book up a clinic session because we can help you with that. It's really important that you give as much information as possible. So CSF will be wanting to understand specifically what the issue is on the farm, how the capital option or item is going to help. And if you're thinking about, for example, we can see in the photographs there, we've got a yard on that left-hand side, which has got a lot of broken concrete on it. So we're generating fouled water from that. So if you were saying to CSF that you would like to apply for concrete yard renewal to improve that yard, then you would need to be explaining where the dirty water runoff is going at the moment, how that's being collected, and how it would be improved if you had new concrete. So how would you be separating clean and dirty water, and where would that be going? So as much information as possible is really important, and you want to include photographs, you want to include maps and plans as well to provide that information. So as far as CSF are concerned, they will endeavour to provide written approval within the mid-tier application window, but if there is a particularly high demand, then this isn't guaranteed. So again, the sooner you put in your request, the better. If you don't have the approval in time, you can still apply without those options into mid-tier, and you could apply later on for a capital-only grant. And the idea of CSF is that catchment sensitive farming will be working with farms on an ongoing basis. So, you know, be prepared to come along to events to be able to receive advice and information going forward, rather than just a one-off grant. So the stages that I'm just going to run through is how CSF support works. So first of all, CSF will sift through the requests for support and approval. They're going to make sure that there is all the information that's needed in that support request form. So we've got lots of information in there, photos, maps, etc. They'll want to make sure that what is being proposed is eligible and it does meet the relevant specifications for those items and options available through Countryside Stewardship. And they want to check as well that this is different to any previous assessment for approval. So if you have been turned down in the past for a particular option, then there is no point for you applying for exactly the same thing. So the second stage, and I apologise, it's quite wordy, this slide, but we will share this with you. What they will want to do at the second stage is to ensure that what is being proposed helps deliver the CSF objectives on farm. So again, this is all about improving water quality and or air quality and or reducing flood risk. They want to know that it's addressing an identified pollution risk on the farm that could negatively impact a water body or sensitive area. And this is thinking about the source pathway receptor model. So we're thinking about what is the source of pollution or pollutant, what is the pathway that it then takes to be able to negatively impact the receptor. So that could be a river, that could be a triple SI and so on. They'll be having a look at, is this addressing a priority pollutant in your specific area? Again, one that might be identified using magic maps or the statement of priorities. And they'll want to make sure that that's matching the priorities that are shown in the relevant Countryside Stewardship Manual. You need to look very carefully at the relevant item or option specification and be aware that CSF may use special conditions or request that you have a specialist advice to look at planning, particularly with regard to farm infrastructure, drainage and so on. CSF will then give a low, medium or high score for proposals which it approves. And this could be used by the RPA to decide which Countryside Stewardship applications are successful. Again, make the most of the clinic sessions if this is something that you are looking at. So that's catchment sensitive farming and countryside stewardship. Do we have any questions in relation to that?
None specifically, Mel.
Okay, I shall move on then to the management of designated sites. So what we're talking about here is triple SIs or scheduled monuments. And you just need to be aware of what you can and can't do as far as the different elements of countryside stewardship are concerned. So if you have a triple SI on your farm or a scheduled monument, then it must be included in your mid-tier application. This is regardless of whether you're going to locate any options on it or not. If you have a triple SI, you will not be eligible for the wildlife offers, so you would need to apply for mid-tier. But if you have a scheduled monument, you are eligible to apply for the wildlife offers. And if you have but either or both of those, they are eligible for capital grants if you are already in an existing scheme. Something that you'll need to refer to is the HEFA, or the Historic Farm Environment Record, because this is specific to your farm and it will give you details of any recommended or mandatory management that would need to be applied for the triple SI or scheduled monuments. And the idea is that where the site is not currently in good condition, that you'll select options and or capital items to improve condition. And there is lots of advice available from Natural England for triple SIs using that website on screen, but also Historic England for advice on scheduled monuments. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about management options for priority habitats and species. So you will see that there are some options for priority habitats and species that are shown on Magic Maps as being a priority. So in order to apply for these options, they must be eligible, and some do require RPA approval as well. So we've got options included in there, such as species-rich grassland. We've got management of coastal floodplain and grazing marsh for overwintering and breeding waders and wildfowl. What we've got there is the compulsory data layer on Magic that would appear under for you to be able to apply. And there are some other eligibility requirements as well. Again, if you think that you've got any of these, or you've had a look on Magic, you know you have, you want to find out a little bit more, again, book up a clinic session and we can go through that process with you. So use Magic to check initial eligibility, then use the grants finder to look at the requirements and the option management for those. If you believe that you have either a species or a habitat that should be a priority one and thus eligible for some of these options, then you would need to email the RPA with evidence to request a change by the 2nd of June 2023. So you might include in there photographs, you might include maps, any species lists or surveys that have been completed. Now, if you want to initially check your eligibility, again, you would go into Magic Maps, you would choose the countryside stewardship layers. And then on this one here, I've specifically looked at grassland. So I'm thinking about lands that may potentially be eligible for species-rich grassland management. And I can see on there, shown in blue is coastal and floodplain grazing marsh on the priority habitat inventory. And then with the lime green, we've got lowland meadows. So that would show you if you have got any fields that are eligible. The process for including those options, except for UP2 and SP9, which don't require approval for turtle dove or stone curlew, is you email the RPA to request approval to include the options in a mid-tier application. and you need to do that by the 2nd of June 2023. So what you would need to include in that email is the list of parcels that you would like to locate any of those options on, the options that you would like. And what will happen is that an assessment visit will be carried out by a Natural England contractor. This will all be arranged by the RPA. They will make a recommendation as to whether the parcels are eligible, and then the RPA will complete the final approval and send this by email to you to include in your application. So just be aware of some of those timelines. Have we got any questions on options that require approval?
We haven't had any come in yet, Mel.
Okay, I'll keep going. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this as well, so we can cover questions there as well. Just a little bit on organic farming and countryside stewardship. So there is funding specifically for organic conversion and organic management, and this is non-competitive. What's really important is that you have any land that you're wanting to put into those options, that it is registered as organic or in conversion to organic status. And you must be registered with an organic control body for the entire duration of the agreement. You can have an application that just includes organic options, but there are other options that are available as well, as long as they are compatible with the organic status. That really was just a very quick one on organics. I'll keep moving on now. Again, if you've got specific questions, then we can cover those at the end. So just thinking about the timetable for mid-tier applications, I know the 18th of August probably seems a long way off, but you do need to be aware of some of these deadlines. As with this type of application, I think it's a really good idea to be able to have a look at the priorities, consider options, have time to mull it over, to be able to go back and check everything before you submit it, rather than doing anything in haste close to the deadline. So our 2nd of June is our first deadline, and this is the last date that you can request parcels to be added to the priority habitats inventory, and also to request approval for management options for those priority habitats and species. And you could do both of those simultaneously. The 9th of June 2023 is the last date to request CSF approval for any options or capital items that you would be wanting to include in a mid-tier application. And our mid-tier and wildlife offers application period ends at midnight on the 18th of August of this year. The timetable is that agreement offers and declarations should be sent out to farmers for agreements that will be starting on the 1st of January 2024. As I said, capital grant agreements start on a rolling basis, as the application window is all year round. And then for any mid-tier or wildlife offer agreements, these would all start on the 1st of January 2024. So just a little bit now about how to apply. So this year it's an online application process using the Rural Payment Service. So you don't need to fill in an application form because all of the business details will be linked to your rural payment site. There will be a requirement to send in maps and any supporting documents by email or post. So in general terms, if you have requested priority options on habitats or species, then you would need to send in your RPA approval to include those in an application. You would include your CSF approval for any capital items or options, and you would be sending in a sketch map for yard options and a farm environment record map, which includes details of the features that you have on the land that you're including in an application. And then you would have an options map as well. Again, use a clinic session to be able to go through those, be able to help you even at the point of submission, check that you have included all the right information. If you're unable to access the rural payments online service for any reason, you can request support to help you apply. So if you ring the RPA on the usual number to request that. If you're using an agent to act on your behalf, they must be registered with the RPA and they must be given the right permission level from you to act on your behalf and access your rural payment site. So it's important to make those checks now. If you haven't got a rural payments account, so you don't have an SBI number, then you need to register with the RPA. If you ring them, they will be able to talk you through that process. If you are already registered and your land is registered as well, you want to make sure that everything is correct. So all of your land parcels that you want to include are showing on your maps under your SBI number. If you have got any parcels that are missing, then you need to complete an RLE1 form and map to be able to get a parcel number for those. Bear in mind that every option is linked to a parcel number. So if you're looking at doing capital items, for example, on yards or buildings, then they will need to have a parcel number as well. It's important that you do that as soon as possible because that parcel will need to be registered before you can proceed with your online application. Just a little bit about updating land use. Now you've probably, hopefully, all done your BPS claims for this year. It's really important that you have the land use correct. And so if there are any errors, then you need to correct those. Again, that will be using an RLE1 form. So it's things like if an area is showing as permanent pasture, but actually it's arable, you need to get that changed first before you can apply. And the other way around is the same as well. Or if you've got land that's showing as ineligible, for example, as scrub, but it should be a different land use, arable or permanent pasture, you must correct that because otherwise it will flag up as being ineligible for some options. All of the land use codes are available online there. Again, if you just want to check that everything is eligible for the options you're looking at, make the most of a clinic session to be able to do that. I'm just going to go through the application process now. First one is read the guidance that's available. We've already talked about considering the options and capital items that are right for you, ensuring that all your parcels are registered, and you've got, if you're using an agent, that they are authorised to act on your behalf. The application process is online. Again, use a one-to-one clinic at any stage of the application process to be able to help you. And I said, if you've got historic features on your land, you will need this historic farm environmental record to give you information. You can request that from the Historic England's HEPA portal, but be aware that that can take up to 20 working days to arrive. Again, we'll give you all of that information and how you apply for that as well. If you're doing the application yourself, make sure that you have the correct permission levels because you need to be able to complete and submit the application. The same thing applies if you're using an agent. You want to make sure that you have the relevant consents, approvals and endorsements that you may need to support your application. Again, this is included under the option specification that's available online. And remember that your mid-tier and wildlife offers must be submitted by the 18th of August of this year. Just a little bit now, this might be relevant to those of you who are already in mid-tier. but also for those of you who might be entering for the first time. It's really important that you obtain and keep evidence to show that if you do have a site visit, that you are eligible and that you have carried out any capital works or you're managing land parcels or options to the required specification. Under each option, it tells you the sort of records that you need to keep, and this will be included in your agreement document as well. So as an example, it might be keeping records of farm operations, stocking levels, fertilizer use, seed mixes, and that sort of thing. Just a little bit on claims, because this is really important. If you have land management options in mid-tier, then you will need to do an annual claim. This follows the same timing as BPS claims. So by the 15th of May, you need to complete a claim to say that you have appropriately managed all of those options that are on your land. It's a very common thing that people don't realise that they need to do this. So make sure that you make a note of that if you have a mid-tier agreement. As far as capital items are concerned, again, there are requirements for records and evidence. These can include that you have either you have approached the Highways Authority, the Local Planning Authority, or the Environment Agency for advice or consent for certain options. There is a requirement for some options to have before, during, and after photographs to show the completion of the work. And there will be a requirement for you to be able to supply invoices that relate to the works that have been carried out, and bank statements to show that you have paid those invoices. So it's really important that you have that information so that your claim for capital payment isn't delayed. I think I've said quite a few times now that there are these free one-to-one clinics available to you. Absolutely nothing to lose by booking up for one of those. It can be at a time of your choosing, and you can use the time that's available to you, even if you're not quite sure at this stage whether you want to apply or whether it's specific management advice. Doesn't matter, please make the use of those clinics. You email falmer@flageast.org.uk or call that number to be able to book a session, and an advisor will get in contact with you. Again, if you're not quite sure about some of the items that are related to catchment sensitive farming, complete that form that I mentioned before, and then you will be able to get some advice there. So that covers mid-tier. I'm just going to do a couple of slides now, just looking at other opportunities that are available and those that are going to be introduced later on this year. So the first one we've got is the Sustainable Farming Incentive. Now, this is a number of different standards with different entry levels that will be covering water quality, air quality, climate change, wildlife and biodiversity. And the first one of those that's available is the soil standard, which I'll talk about in a moment. For SFI at the moment, 3-year agreements, and you are able to make amendments every 12 months. It is a very simple online application process. And again, you choose the parcels that you want to have in your SFI agreement. Payments are made quarterly, so 3 months from now you will be getting your next payment, and the application process from the point of submission to getting your agreement is in the region of 48 hours. It's important to note that you can have a countryside stewardship agreement and an SFI agreement, but actions cannot be double funded, which is, it makes sense. But when you log in to do the online application, it will actually show you, it will exclude the areas that aren't eligible. So it makes that application process easier. So DEFRA has said that as far as the sustainable farming incentive is concerned, that they will measure success when they can see 70% of farms and farmland in the scheme by 2028, and they can see farmers increasing coverage and levels of ambition over time. And there is evidence of those ambitious outcomes. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about the soil standard. So this has been open for applications from June last year. And we have two different levels at the arable and horticultural soil standard. I'll talk about grassland in a moment. So we have an introductory level, which pays £22 per hectare per year for 3 years of the agreement. And this is effectively your cash cropping area. So it will be excluding ineligible land. It will be excluding anything that's in a HLS or a countryside stewardship agreement. Now, the requirements in order to receive that payment are that you complete a soil assessment and a management plan within the first 12 months. By soil assessment, this means carrying out a visual soil assessment using a spade and just digging a small pit to assess structure, and then taking into account risk factors on your farm. So this is rather like the old soil protection review, if you remember that, which is looking at slope, it's looking at soil type, it's looking at proximity to water, and the risk of runoff or an erosion. If these things are new to you, then again, lots of free advice available through catchment sensitive farming. There are specialist visits where someone will come out and they will actually go through how you complete a soil management plan and do a visual soil assessment on farm. The second requirement is that you test for soil organic matter, and this needs to be done every 5 years. Now, if you're doing it yourself, roughly the cost of a soil organic matter test is sort of £15 to £20. If this is something that you've not done before, then again, speak to catchment sensitive farming, because testing for soil organic matter is something that they can offer with their free advice. The third requirement is that you need to add organic matter to all land that you include in your agreement at least once during the 3 years. So this can be applying organic manures of any form. It can be incorporating cover crops, straw, grass, crop residues, etc. And then the fourth requirement is that you have winter cover on at least 70% of your land in the agreement from the beginning of December through to the end of February. Now, this winter cover, it can be from grass, it can be from autumn sown crops, it can be from cover crops, or it can be from weedy stubbles. And if you're establishing a crop early in the spring, then you are able to destroy that winter cover earlier than the end of February, as long as it's not more than 6 weeks before you establish the next crop. So looking at that, the cost in going into that introductory level is pretty low. And I think that is a good opportunity for most farms to be able to benefit from. There is an intermediate level. Now this pays £40 per hectare per year, and you've got the first 3 points of the introductory level. But on the fourth one, you still need to have winter cover on 70% of the land, but 20% needs to be provided by multi-species cover crops. And this can be any mix of brassicas, legumes, grasses and cereals, at least 2 species in there. So that's the arable and the horticultural soil standard. The grassland standard is similar. This pays £28 per hectare per year at the introductory level. Again, you're completing a soil assessment and a management plan for each field that you have in the agreement. You're testing soil organic matter. And the third requirement is that you're minimising bare ground by having no more than 5% of the land in the agreement bare over winter. So this is things like if you're reseeding, do that early enough to have the green cover by December, avoiding poaching, that sort of thing. The intermediate level, this pays £58 per hectare per year, the same 3 points that we've got in the introductory level, but it's asking that you establish or maintain herbal lays on at least 15% of the land in the agreement. So that's a mixture of grasses, legumes, herbs, and wildflowers. So those options are available now, as I say, a straightforward application process, lots of help to be able to help you comply with the requirements for that as well. We do know that there are going to be future SFI standards in 2023. Hopefully there will be more information that will be released, so you can see what's available to you and the payments that are available as well. But these are going to cover things like hedgerows, integrated pest management, nutrient management, and both low input and improved grassland, as well as arable and horticultural land. So do sign up so you get the updates on those future standards. Again, a good way of being able to pick and choose things that work on your farm for you and to replace some of that lost BPS income. Just worth mentioning about landscape recovery. So this is aimed at landowners and managers who want to take a more sort of large scale approach to producing environmental and climate goods on the land. So this is open to individuals or groups who want to deliver 500 to 5,000 hectare scale projects. And the more information is available on the .gov.uk website. So that concludes my presentation. I appreciate that it's a lot of information in a relatively short space of time. I think I've said it a lot of times now, I'm going to say it again, make the most of those clinic sessions to be able to guide you through this process and be able to filter through to the information that's most relevant for you. Do we have any questions?
We don't have many coming in, Mel. I think you've obviously covered everything in a lot of detail. I would actually, they're starting to come through, so I would encourage, we've got over 80 people on the call, so if you do have specific questions, I would say now is the time to put some into the Q&A, and we'll try and cover those. Yep, they're coming through now, Mel, so we'll start getting them across to you.
Do you want me to fire some out?
Yeah, if you start, Nathan, and then.
So Nick Dean has asked about, this is about organic matter, adding organic matter. Does adding organic matter include grazing sheep on winter turnip catch crops, or do they have to be ploughed in green?
They don't have to be ploughed in. That would count as an addition, yes. The crop rather than the output from the sheep. So okay. We would still have residues from that.
Mike Bacon says, can you do a dummy run on the RPA to test it out? Not that I'm aware of. You could go through all the way through and not press submit. Yes, that's about all you can do. Do you think, Mel?
Yes, you can do. So you can start a mid-tier application and you can select fields and you can select options and so on. But until you actually submit, you've still got the opportunity to sort of play about with it and make changes and so on. If you did submit and then you didn't want to proceed, then you could just not accept the agreement. But yet, yes, it's you can start an application and go back to it. Just remember to save before you log out each time.
Nathan, I'll just come in here with Jenny Smith's question asking about whether you can have more than one-to-one more than one-to-one session. Generally know that the limit is one per business, per organisation. If there are complexities or sort of issues, we can make a case to Natural England for you to have a second or a follow-up session. So it is possible, but it's not the norm. Thank you.
So we've got a question here. Is SFI options possible in addition to mid-tier?
Yes, so you can have an SFI agreement, soil standard agreement, and a mid-tier agreement, but you can't be funded for the same things. So, for example, if you had a mid-tier cover crop option, you couldn't then use that as the overwinter cover in your SFI. But when you apply for SFI, it will exclude all of the areas that aren't eligible. So that does make that a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think it's true to say, isn't it, Mel, that a countryside stewardship mid-tier agreement would trump an SFI agreement. So if you've already got a mid-tier agreement, then it will, when you go in to do an SFI, all those parcel areas would be excluded if they're not eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other way around, if you're in SFI now, but you're looking at going into mid-tier, then the mid-tier would sort of trump the SFI options when your agreement started in January. So there's no issue about waiting to apply for SFI. That's something that you could do now straight away and start to generate payments.
Are there any you'd like to pick up there, Rebecca?
I'm just having a look at some of the new ones that have come in. Is there a payment for footpaths? No, there isn't. Am I required to photograph hedges for an agreement? If over what length? You're required to photograph hedges if you're putting them into a capital option. If you're going to be coppicing, laying, you'll need before, always useful to do during and after photographs that you will have to put in with your capital claim. But otherwise you're not required to take photographs of your hedges for a management option. But I think it's always good to take a few photographs anyway across the farm of things that you're doing and have a sort of log of things that are going on regarding options.
Thank you, Rebecca. Nick Dean's rephrased his question, Nathan. I don't know if you or Mel have seen Nick's around grazing his winter stubble turnips.
Yeah, so he says, if I graze my winter stubble turnips, does this count as adding organic matter?
Yes.
So Christine's asking, can you confirm the minimum number of species for mixed species cover crop in the intermediate level SFI? Choice is difficult if growing seed crops in rotation, e.g. legume species required to be 6 years free for that legume seed crop.
So at least 2 species.
At least two legumes. Is that what you mean?
No, at least 2 species. Multi-species.
Oh, it is within the
2.
multi-species. Yeah,
Yeah,
gotcha.
It doesn't have to be a legume at all if you don't want it to be.
No.
Michael says, if our grassland is all now grazed by sheep, can we still apply for an improved grassland soil grant? If so, what steps should be taken?
So if it's all grazed by sheep, then you could apply for the SFI improved grassland standard. So that's doing the visual soil assessment and management plan, testing for soil organic matter, and ensuring that no more than 5% of land is bare over winter. So how it's managed is less important than carrying out the actions.
Rebecca, did you answer that one on deer fencing? In mid, there isn't a deer fencing in mid tier.
Not in mid tier, no. That's all through woodland grants.
Yeah. So you'd either have to be looking at the higher tier woodland stuff, or you'd have to be going through the Forestry Commission scheme.
Yeah.
To get deer fencing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the last open question.
Is there a final call for some more questions? I imagine people are keen to get on some fine weather. We haven't had as many questions today. We had a previous webinar on the 25th of April, where we had quite a lot, but these webinars, they have been recorded. They will be available via the Flag East website for you to look at and use the slides and the information. Oh, we have a question coming in from Jenny Smith.
Says, if we have an SFI agreement already but want to put mid-tier options that are not compatible, will we get our SFI payment reduced?
Yes, so from the point the mid-tier starts, so the 1st of January, if there are mid-tier options that would be double funding with SFI, then the SFI area or payment will be reduced. The mid-tier would trump that.
Gail Ambon says, how are outcomes judged for wildlife offers, e.g. turtle doves?
So it's about having in the wildlife offers, having the options and making sure that you meet the specification for the individual options. So, for example, if you've got pollen and nectar plots, that you have got lots of flowering species during the summer months and so on, rather than it being specifically about individual species.
Okay. Next question about the slides. I think they are going to be uploaded. I think Neil is just having our answer in there.
Yeah, we'll make them available via the Flag East website.
Again, that's all the open questions. Nobody wants to post any more.
I think we'll wrap up there. I'd like to thank you, Mel, for again covering a lot of information very clearly. Nathan and Rebecca for being there to help answer various questions and queries. And just a reminder to all attendees today that we'll send out a link to the online feedback form, and that will appear on the screen when the webinar ends. So again, please, can you complete this? I mentioned earlier, it will help you claim basis points if you need them, and it helps us give feedback to Natural England. We are, just to stress finally again, that we are providing these one-to-one sessions with a specialist advisor that are free to all applicants. So we've given the details of how they can be booked, but again, that will be sent to you after the email. So I'd like to thank you for joining us, and goodbye.